Hey YouTube, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. And today for you, like I said, I will have the episode 2 of the show Titans titled Hawk and Dove for you. And here we go. Okay, so in this episode we open to Hawk and Dove, who we are also introduced to in the very first scene of this show. Hawk's getting tortured, and then Dove comes in and saves his ass. But I just like to say the guy who plays Hawk, he was in The Wedding Ringer, and I believe he also did the voice of Raphael in the new Ninja Turtles movie. I've seen this guy in a couple other things, and I've always said he would be good in a superhero movie or show. And I'm just really glad to see that he finally was in, because he fits into this show really well. And this guy's not a bad actor either, but I just like to put that out there that I'm finally glad to see him in one of these kind of roles. Okay, so after this opening scene, we see Hawk, who's kind of recovering. He's in a bathtub. He's got scars. He's really beat up, and you can tell he's definitely been at this for a very long time. And he's also in a relationship with Dove, from what you can tell. And they also tell us that it is their 3.5-year anniversary, and Hawk buys, or I shouldn't say buy, but he builds Dove her own actual dove sanctuary on the top of their apartment building, which is kind of nice because so far in the first episode everything was very dark tonally, but at this part they kind of show a softer side, which is actually very nice. And also in the next scene we see that Hawk, Dove, and Robin 4 years prior not necessarily worked as a team, but it's also revealed that Robin snuck out against Batman's wishes to go out with them. In numerous scenes in this episode, it really bothers me that Raven keeps trying to imply to people that she is an adult and that she should be treated like an adult, but the fact of the matter is she is not. And it kind of gets angry with me because certain people, like Dick, treats her as a kid, which he should, but she's just a dangerous kid. Dove in other scenes says, I just treat her like an adult. But, we see that Raven has these outbursts or things that, a kid would have. So I'm kind of torn where that is at this point. I mean, obviously, Raven's not to really kind of be messed with at this point, but still, she's still a kid. And I think Dick knows that best because the scenes that they had together, he really invests. Okay, so where we left off in episode 1, where Dick and Raven were on their way somewhere, here's where finally you see that the friends that they are going to see are in fact Hawk and Dove. There is an interesting scene in this episode where Dick is in the car outside of a hotel, and he has a phone that has a bunch of listed names, and if you look at them, you see some of them are actually, other superheroes. But the one person he calls to ask for help is Alfred, which is interesting because, like Batman in this show so far, people make references to, they know who he is and he's been around for a while at this point. But it would be really interesting to see if some point down the line they actually, have Batman pop up at some point. I wouldn't be heartbroken if he didn't, but if they do, I hope they really consider what they're trying to do, because it's going to be hard considering there's, like Justice League movie and stuff like that. So you don't really want to stray too far from like the modern continuity. And then we get introduced to this very strange family, and this episode is actually pretty funny with the dialogue, but somebody's impatiently ringing the doorbell and this family's eating breakfast, and the father goes to answer the door, goes, "Hold your fucking horses," which was just funny. When Raven and Dove get introduced to each other, Raven shakes Dove's hand, and she can kind of, I guess, see into people's past and stuff like that, but she can see from touching her that her and Dove and Robin used to have a relationship. It shows a sexual one in the pictures, but you can kind of imply it's more than that. But it's interesting because if you take the fact that the three of them were fighting 4 years ago together, and her boyfriend have been together 3.5. You can kind of make the implication that may have her and Robin may have happened before those two, which you can kind of tell is probably the case just because of Hawk's character. Every time there's a scene with Dick, he just acts like there's a lot of tension, and he kind of acts like Cyclops in X-Men movies where him and Wolverine are always, stay away from my girl. It's kind of what it seems like a little bit. I'm not saying it's a direct comparison, but that's the kind of like relationship they're shown to having, which isn't terrible. Hawk and Dove plan to retire from crime fighting after they do one last job, and Dove tries to get Robin's help despite Hawk not knowing about it, and Robin says, you know, you're making a mistake, because he kind of looks into it on his fancy Bat computer, and, you know, he kind of tells him he doesn't think it's a good idea. Back and forth between that and another scene, you see that Robin is planning on leaving Raven there with the two of them, and leaving a significant amount of money, which you can kind of figure out that that's what he called Alfred for, was to get money so that he could pay them, or at least give them money to look after Raven for a while. They say that he was going to leave her, but I don't believe that he was going to leave her for good. But that's just me personally. So also in this scene, we have another conversation with Robin and Doves, and Robin says something really interesting that's kind of been on everybody's mind, but you still haven't quite seen the extent of it yet in the series, even though it's only on episode 2. But, you know, Robin says, you don't understand, or you don't know what I've become. And you could tell from the action scenes, he's definitely hiding something. There's a lot more going on than what we are getting. And it's interesting to see that, because, you know, Robin usually gets made fun of by a lot of people, not just people outside of the comic book, you know, world. But, you know, it's good that they have him being what I like to consider like the most badass character. They're making him like the most gritty. They're kind of making him the dark one. Like, he keeps getting beat up on in the series, but he still doesn't ever get down. And you could tell, you know, that's something that was instilled to him by Batman, but it's also interesting to have that. And then we have Robin's cop partner gets killed by the crazy family looking for Robin. And then we get to the final fight where Hawk and Dove are going about their plan, and it seems to go a little bit easier than they anticipated, and then they kind of get ambushed. You know, Robin shows up and saves their lives, and basically he's kind of, you could tell the look afterwards, but you could tell he kind of is scared Dove. One thing I noticed was with the fighting, it really is reminiscent of Batman. Like, if you were to put it together, like, the way he's fighting in the show is the way that they should have Batman fighting in the movies all the time. Which is interesting, because, you know, he keeps saying he wanted to get away from Batman, he stopped his partnership with Batman, but when you really look at it so far, just 2 episodes in, he really is a lot like him. But I want to see if that's something they could flip. But that would just be an interesting thing to see. But also, Robin saves him by stabbing a guy in the dick. And earlier, what I was just saying, in an earlier scene, Robin says that the more he tends to care for somebody, the more he ends up hurting the other people worse. Which is him basically saying, you know, which I think was also part of his problem, was he was getting caught up in, you know, caring about people. And when he saw that the kind of things that, you know, the people committing crimes were doing to them, he would hurt them worse than that. And you can kind of see where you would lose, you know, your grip on that of, you know, restraint of, you know, well, you did this horrible thing to a person, so I'm gonna, you know, hurt you worse and show you what it feels like. So I just have to say, and not just being a Robin fanboy, I am really, really interested at where they're going with Robin. I knew from the minute that I saw this show he was going to be my favorite character. I just can't wait to see. And I mean, I saw that the show was renewed for a 2nd season, and I'm just hoping, since, you know, it's weekly, we get an episode. I really want to see if they actually eventually get to him being Nightwing, which I know wouldn't technically fit Teen Titans, or him stay as Robin, but it would just be interesting to see the growth of these characters going forward. And before I get to the very last scene, I'd just really like to point out that the reason, instead of doing 2 episodes in one this time, was because after I watched this 2nd episode, I really thought that this so far is probably the best overall episode, and I don't just mean like tonally or anything. I mean overall, this is probably the best episode out of all of them so far. And I just feel like it's a good representation of the characters and everything, because it really just kind of shows that, you know, these characters, for the most part, are good people who are just trying to do good things. And, Usually it's other people who misinterpret it or flip things around, in like media and stuff like that on them. But, you can kind of tell that these people are, they're really sacrificing a lot just to do a lot for the betterment of people. And so for the last part of this episode, before we fade to black and go into episode 3, the creepy family from earlier in the episode finally catches up with Hawk, Dove, Robin, and Raven, and a fight ensues. They get their asses kicked. Dove gets thrown off of a roof through her Dove sanctuary, and other than that, that's all we see. One thing I would just like to point out is, I know these are reviews, but I'm not necessarily going into, every scene. I'm not going into everything, and I'm not intentionally, with some things, giving you the best description, and that's because I want it to kind of sound good to you, and possibly, maybe you might check it out. DC kind of needs help right now as far as their marketing and their reputation, and I just mean that as in like movies and entertainment, just because, they're so overlooked because of Marvel, because Marvel was here first and did it.